Welcome and anchor down from the Vanderbilt campus. Jimmy and Zach are back here with week 4 of our Vanderbilt Sports Podcast. JT and Zeke on West End. Today we will talk about the win over Austin Peay. Finally got a win.
Yep.
Ole Miss game, the state of the SEC, and introduce our new battle section of the podcast.
All right, so let's get into it. Austin Peay, the best team in the country, has been upset by Vanderbilt.
How about that?
Sadly, that is not what we were seeing in the headlines, but 47-7 looked pretty good. Obviously, the first quarter, I was scared. I'm sure everyone else was too, but the entire second half and the second quarter actually was just dominant on our part.
I think I can summarize this game in 2 words: Trent and Sherfield. He is a beast. 16 catches, was open virtually every play. Sherfield looked great out there on Saturday.
And Ludwig's been listening to the podcast, I think. All those screen passes, short passes, it was good to see. Sherfield was amazing. 16 receptions, in my opinion, was the most significant stat.
It is really great. Great performance by Sherfield. Going forward, he might become a guy that defenses actually have to respect, open up some windows for other guys, maybe get the running game going. I think although Austin Peay can't really judge much from the game, I think you can judge an individual player's performance like Sherfield. He looked great.
Yeah, I think hopefully that was his coming out party, and another hope of mine is that maybe the offense found its rhythm a little bit and can continue that in the future.
I think the defense looked great too. If there wasn't that muffed punt, Austin Peay wouldn't have scored, in my opinion. I think most people would agree as well.
Yeah.
15th in defensive efficiency after this week, after playing two offenses that are supposed to be great, Western Kentucky and Georgia. I think you really can't complain with the job Mason's doing there.
One of the best defenses in the country. We may even be better than 15th, in my opinion. We'll wait and see, though. This week, coming up, we do not have Austin Peay, but we have a team that maybe a couple people in the country think are slightly better than Austin Peay.
I think it might be debatable. Ole Miss is a good team. They are a powerhouse, ranked number 3 in the country going into it.
That game against Alabama was unbelievable, and they've looked good. I mean, their first 2 games, they scored 73 points. Chad Kelly's looked pretty good at quarterback, and he has Laquan Treadwell, who's arguably the best receiver in the country, as well as Evan Engram, who is indisputably the best tight end, I'd say.
I'm pretty excited to see Trey Herndon on Treadwell. I think Trey Herndon's really underrated. I said last week he's our best corner, and I'm going to stick by that.
I agree with that.
I think it'll be an interesting matchup to see. I think the biggest concern is Ole Miss's defensive line going against our offensive line. If we're going to be able to run the ball at all, and if McCrary's going to have any time to throw.
Yeah, we'll see what our offense can do. I have no idea. We're 24.5-point underdogs. I think we're going to beat the spread just because our defense will keep us in the game, and anything can happen.
I agree. I think Ole Miss's offense is worse than Georgia's offense, who we held to 31 points. I think our defense could hold them in the 20s. I think the question is, can we score?
Yeah, and I will be in Oxford for the game on Saturday.
Very jealous.
I cannot wait for that. It should be a great SEC
Get that
atmosphere.
insider report next week from the man at the stadium.
Absolutely.
Down in the Grove.
All right, and I think now we're going to move on and talk about the state of the SEC as a whole. I know a lot of people on ESPN and just all over the country have been debating, is the SEC actually as good as we think it is?
Or is it gone? Is it past its day?
And it's tough to say. The way I see it right now is, for the first time, the conference is top-heavy. And I think most years, coaches like Les Miles and all the coaches that argue for 8 in-conference games opposed to 9 say that week in and week out, you're facing, a gruesome opponent.
That's just not the case anymore. It really isn't.
It really isn't. I'd be cool with facing any of the teams in the SEC East. I mean, they're almost like ACC teams. They really are,
There's very little separation.
It's the same exact thing.
After Georgia, there's very little separation in the East, and I think if you're talking about the SEC as a whole, we would both agree that Ole Miss is the best team. I think that there's 5 teams that separate themselves from the rest. I think Ole Miss, in no order, Ole Miss, Bama, LSU, A&M, and Georgia are clearly the 5 best teams.
Yeah, those are clearly the best 5. I don't even think you can make an argument for a 6th. I'd say Ole Miss is my number 1. For me, I think Bama is still 2, and I think that they're almost like a tied number 1 with Ole Miss, just because I think they were the better team in the game and that they just had too many costly turnovers. and luck maybe went on Ole Miss's side with a couple plays.
I think that that's a valid opinion. I'd actually put A&M at 2. I think that they're a team that is really, really fun to watch. Kyle Allen, very good quarterback. Myles Garrett might be the best defensive end in the country. The way he gets jumps on some of those pass plays. And their defense has been a pleasant surprise for them. I mean, they were expected to have a great offense, but their defense has been one of the best as well.
Since Chaffetz has taken over that defense, they've looked pretty good. And Kyler Murray, their backup quarterback, is one of the funnest guys to watch. I know he's not starting, but he's fun to watch. And they have other athletes like Speedy Noyle. Josh Reynolds has been an amazing
Speedy Noyle is very
receiver. Speedy. He actually is. That is true. But yeah. And then, so you have A&M as your 2. I have Bama. My 3 is actually Georgia. It's hard to tell since they haven't faced West teams. But their offense is so good. Grayson Lambert, 24 of 25 on Saturday. And then you got to look at Nick Chubb as arguably the best running back in the country, as well as Sony Michel, who's been a great receiving threat for them out of the backfield.
So you're saying you're looking at Ole Miss, Bama, Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia. And then I'll put A&M as my 4, and then LSU as my 5.
I think I'd probably go. I think you can make an argument really for any of these teams at this point. I'd go Ole Miss, A&M, Bama, Georgia, and then LSU. I think that LSU still has some to prove. Their running game, Fournette, those highlights from this week, those were insane.
Yeah.
I don't know who would try to jump on him to tackle him like that one Auburn defensive back, but that was still one of the craziest highlights I've seen.
Yeah, I could see any of these 5 teams squeezing into the playoff.
Even
honestly,
maybe Mississippi State could make a run too in a league that's weak for quarterback play. They probably have the best, although they don't have much besides him.
Just imagine if you put Prescott in any of those top 5 teams.
Prescott on Alabama would be insane.
Yeah, so I think we're in agreement. 1 or 2 of these teams is going to make the playoff. I could very easily see 2, at least 1 for sure.
If you had Alabama, Ole Miss, you could even see you could see 2 teams from the SEC, 2 teams from the Big 12 even.
Oh yeah.
Make it another college playoff is young. It would be a first. Most things would be a first in it, but I bet that's something that wouldn't happen again for a while.
Yeah, so all in all, I'd say SEC's experiencing a down year. The depth just isn't where it's been. Back 5 years ago, the SEC was amazing. The defenses were by far the best. I can't say that anymore, but what I hope I can say is that 5 of the maybe top 15 teams are in the conference, and I'm confident in saying that we do have the best fans and the best atmosphere in the country, that's for sure.
I'd have to agree, and there is something nice that comes with that, especially in the East, all the teams really are similar after Georgia. It makes the games really fun to pick, and that kind of leads us into our battle section of the podcast. Jimmy has been saying that he has a gift, a knack, a natural given talent of picking college football games.
It's actually proven by science.
And I'm out here to prove him wrong. So this week we have 3 SEC games plus 1 wild card game. Get excited about that we're going to pick. I think we're going to start out with 2 teams that each scored 9 points last week. You can name them, Missouri and Kentucky. Who do you have in those?
All right, well, there's one big difference. Mizzou scored 9 against UConn. Kentucky scored 9 against Florida's very good defense. I'm going with Kentucky in this one.
For that same exact reason, I'm going to go with Kentucky. Watch the whole Missouri game. They looked very, very bad. It would have been a good week for us to have them the way that they looked. I'm going to go with Kentucky.
All right, yeah, and transitioning on, I think we're going to go Tennessee versus Florida in Gainesville. This one's tough. I'm going to go with Tennessee. Their offense looked good. Alvin Kamara and Jalen Hurd have been a 2-headed horse at running back. They've been very good. I'm going with Tennessee. Yeah.
I'm going to go with Florida in this one, because they're playing down in the swamp. I think these 2 teams are very similar. I think that Will Grier has proved that he can get the job done at QB, so I'm going to go with Florida.
Yeah, winner of that one I think is the second best in the SEC also.
SEC East.
SEC East, yeah.
They still get destroyed by anybody in the West besides Arkansas.
Yeah, I think that's true. Moving on to the 3rd game, Mississippi State versus Auburn. In Auburn, I'm going to go with Mississippi State. Jeremy Johnson has just looked horrible for Auburn. He's just not quite there yet. Carl Lawson's still out at defensive end, and Dak Prescott's the best QB in the conference.
I'd have to agree. I'm going with Mississippi State. I'm a huge Prescott fan, and I feel like Auburn's playing with absolutely no confidence. I think Mississippi State is going to go in there on the road and get the W. And now it's time for our wild card game. This is a game that we're excited about that's not in the SEC. That's sitting here after watching our game. Hopefully I'll be able to catch some of this one. UCLA, Arizona. It's the game day game this week.
Yep,
what do you think is going to go?
Arizona.
UCLA is going in as a 4-point favorite on the road, although each team is 3-0 and hasn't proved much.
It's hard to make a prediction on this one. These 2 teams are even in my books, but since it's in Arizona, in Tucson, I'm going to have to go with Anu Solomon and the Wildcats.
Oh no, going into the season, I thought UCLA might emerge as the best team in the Pac-12, so I'm going to stick to my guns on this one. I'm going to go UCLA.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
So we have 2 games that we agree on, 2 games that we're split on. We'll see UCLA, Arizona. That'll be interesting, in Tennessee, Florida. See, come back next week, see who is right, see if Jimmy really has that God's gift for picking college football games, as he believes he does.
I do, and I think that is all we have for today. Thank you for tuning in and to Anchor Down.
Anchor Down.